that yoga, like life, is a process of refining and evolving. Simply slowing down and being aware is a place to begin. Hi, my name is Stacy Milner-Collins. Welcome to Yoga in Practice.
Thursdays at 5 p.m. We're local and educational. You're watching WLAE-TV, celebrating 40 years of New Orleans public television.
Inside New Orleans Sports with Eric Asher is underwritten by...
At Villeries Florist, we deliver the magic of flowers 7 days a week to the North Shore and South Shore in the New Orleans area. Whether it's for birthday parties, baby celebrations, Villeries provides colorful floral displays for all. With a store full of fresh-cut flowers, exotic tropical flowers, orchids, roses, and even fruit baskets, our goal is to make your vision a reality. Villeries Florist, proudly serving Louisiana since 1969.
Dave Miette Insurance Agency. Auto, home, flood, business, 504-556-0809. Dave Miette, INSagency.com.
C&C Drugs is a family-owned pharmacy that's been serving Southeast Louisiana for over 50 years. Whether you need help taking care of an elderly family member, a growing child, or even a pet, C&C provides patient-centered care for your entire family. C&C Drugs, large enough to serve you, small enough to know you. Locations in Mandeville and Araby.
Good evening and welcome to another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Over the next hour, we cover all the home teams as we always do. Saints, LSU, Tulane, Pelicans, all on tap. We'll talk a little bit about, again, what's going on with the Southland. We have a member of the Southland now that is in the from Louisiana. It's in the big dance. We'll give some props to the NAI schools who will start tomorrow on their venture to try to get a championship. And to break it down for us, two of the best we have in the entire state. Les East, CrescentCitySports.com, NOLA.com, Saturday Down South, and Brett Martel of the Associated Press join us on our program tonight. Gentlemen, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for being with us. Before we get started, we always like to let you guys tell us a little bit about what you guys are involved in. Les, you got a fantastic book. You're doing stuff with NOLA.com now. Tell us all about it.
Thanks, Eric. The book is called Donkeys, Elephants, and Giraffes. It's a political novel. It's available on all the major online platforms, such as BarnesandNoble.com and Amazon.com. Writing for Crescent City Sports, and as you mentioned, NOLA.com, helping out with the Pelicans coverage and some other projects here and there. Back to my old stomping grounds. And Saturday Down South, covering LSU and the SEC from time to time. So it's keeping me busy.
Maybe they ought to keep you on the Pelicans beat. Ever since you've been on it, they've been playing pretty well. Maybe they ought to keep you on that.
A lot better.
Yeah, maybe ought to keep you on that beat. Brett, welcome back to the show. Always good to have you, my friend. Tell us about the Associated Press.
Yeah, well, first it's good to be on with Les, who's was a well-established sports writer even when I first moved here in 1999. And it sounds like he should maybe be a guest on your radio show too, to talk about his book, right? Because you talk more about politics there. But AP, I think a lot of people know it, although we joke sometimes it stands for Anonymous Press. So if you haven't heard of me, it's okay. But AP, international news organization based in New York, and I've been in New Orleans as kind of a correspondent to the world from New Orleans since 1999, and in sports full-time since 2006.
Yeah. Both these guys won't say, but both are award-winning journalists. Again, we're lucky to have them tonight. All right, guys, let's start with the New Orleans Saints. Again, active, which again goes against the MO of this team in previous years. A lot of it had to do with the cap, but again, even when you look at when they were active, Jarris Bird, Brandon Browner, I can go right down the line. A lot of times they made mistakes when they came out the box. Again, very, very aggressive. But it looks like, again, on paper, they have done a great job in restocking this roster. Jacksonville running back, Louisiana native, Travis Etienne Jr., 4 years, $52 million. Bills guard, offensive guard, David Edwards, 4 years, $62 $61 million. Tulane punter, formerly of Minnesota, Ryan Wright, 4 years for $14 million, $8 million guaranteed. And Noah Fant, 2 years, $8.75 million, $4.5 million is guaranteed. They finished up getting Caden Ellis, the former Saint that went to the Falcons. He's back at 3 years, $33 million, $23 million unguaranteed. They re-signed John Ridgway to a contract. Again, they did lose, obviously, Demario Davis, Alante Taylor. Also, again, Foster Moreau signed with the Houston Texans yesterday. Overall, it looks like on paper they've done a really good job coming out of the box in free agency.
Yeah, they really have. And, all of the moves made sense and addressed a lot of their needs, not every one of them. But the thing that was most jarring, I think, is everything happened on Monday.
Right.
We've become accustomed to them not having a lot of money, not being able to be real aggressive, and having to sit back a little bit and see who was left after the initial wave that they could afford. But they had the money to be more aggressive this time, and they went after it. And it looks to this point like they've done really well. Losing Demario Davis is not ideal, and nobody's going to replace him. But since you had to get a linebacker, I think Caden Ellis was an excellent choice. Good fit with Brandon Staley's defense, and somebody who I think is extremely well liked and respected in the organization.
Brett?
Yeah, I mean, this is always a time of optimism, off seasons, they are, and we've had 5 previous optimistic off seasons, somewhat, although maybe more concerned in some years than others. And really, you don't know anything until they start playing, and even the best looking moves can blow up in your face, whether it's from injuries or a bad fit in the system or bad chemistry or whatever. So we have to wait and see. But I mean, I think what's important to focus on now is that if you would have asked most of us, based on what happened last year, what are some of their primary needs going into the offseason, you would have said interior offensive line, running back, and receiver, and you can't do all that in the draft. You've got to be aggressive in free agency and trying to address some of that, at least 1, if not 2 out of 3, and it looks like they've addressed 2 out of 3 with that, which I think increases the likelihood maybe of using a higher draft pick on a receiver, say. But I think it, so much of Kellen Moore's offense, it seems to be predicated on having a strong offensive line like he did in Philadelphia. And this is a move in that direction, certainly, with Edwards shoring up a left side of the line that's really looks really talented now.
Yes.
With Banks.
They did have some losses, as we talked about. Demario Davis signs with the Jets, 2 years, $22 million, $50 million guaranteed. Alante Taylor to the Titans with an incredible deal for him, 3 years, $60 million, $42 million guaranteed. They lose Luke Fortner to the Panthers. He signed a 1-year deal for $4.75 million. Jack Stoll goes to the Cleveland Browns. I mentioned again Foster Moreau signing with Houston. The one thing about this particular free agent period for the New Orleans Saints is teams traditionally, when they come out the box and they're very, very aggressive, they overpay for the players they get in those first couple of days. For the most part, the Saints did not overpay for their players. Again, ATN maybe got a above market deal. Edwards got a below market deal. Ryan Wright got an above market deal. Again, Noah Fant and Caden Ellis, again, about where they were. Caden Ellis maybe a little bit above what his market value was, but for the most part, I don't want to say they were frugal, but again, they were smart the way they did it, and they didn't seem like they overpaid for a lot of the players. Again, maybe there might have been a situation where ATN might have some other suitors, and maybe they had to go a little bit higher than maybe they wanted to, but they targeted the players they wanted. They were aggressive. They got out and got those players, and they didn't overspend in some cases.
Yeah, and I think that's the real key to the whole thing, is not only addressing the needs they needed to address, but doing so in a fiscally responsible manner, which I think on balance they did. Yeah, you did a good job of laying out some a little more than you might have seen to be the market value, some a little bit less. I think Edwards was probably the best value of all of them.
No doubt.
With the economics of the deal and how highly thought of he was
and
on the
need?
open market. And fitting probably the biggest single need, starting left guard. So, yeah, that's what's been so impressive about this, is not only who they got, but the way they were able to do it with fiscal responsibility.
Brett?
Yeah, and also speaking of fiscal responsibility, I think, what Davis was getting from New York relative to what the Saints needed, that might have been too much to pay a 37-year-old.
Right.
Because the thing is, even though he's coming off a highly productive season and he's been great for you for a long time, players who are great for a long time at that age do have sudden drop-offs. It might not happen this year. The Jets might be thrilled with him this year. They might not be thrilled with him in 2 years, though, and then they'll have maybe paid too much. But I mean, the thing is, the Saints are, I guess, essentially replacing him with a younger linebacker with a lot of upside and a guy that they were invested in going into the draft. Right. And he was kind of a guy that got away because of the tight financial circumstances they were in previously. And now they're able to bring him back. I think they had a lot of confidence in him before, and after the way he's played the last 2 seasons in Atlanta, they have a lot more confidence in him now.
One of the amazing things that happened, again, that was maybe under the radar a bit, and Les and I were talking about this before the show started, the Saints were able to trade punter Kai Kroger to the Houston Texans, and they swapped 2028 draft picks. The Saints will get a 6th-round pick. The Texans will get a 7th-round pick for a guy that they were getting ready to cut.
Yeah, that's the head scratcher in the whole thing, is because Kroger had a bad year as a rookie last year, which is why they went out and signed Ryan Wright. So you know that he's going to be released. You don't know when, but I mean, if you want the guy, first of all, based on his performance last year, there are certainly other candidates you could have gotten that wouldn't have cost you a draft choice to get. Now, he had a good college career. He may be a really good punter for a long time, but at this point in time, he has no skins on the wall. He's going to be released. You're going to be able to get him for nothing. Right. So the fact that they were able to get something for him is just mind-blowing to me. Great job by Mickey Loomis in the front office to pull that off. People in Houston may be scratching their heads, but as you pointed out off air, that there could be somebody on the coaching staff who has a tie to him, or they saw something and they said, no, we can fix this. I can work with this. So there must be some sort of football reason that they had for doing this that's not apparent to us.
Great deal, though, for the Saints, right? I mean, to trade a player that you're going to cut, and even though, again, and even though it's a 6th-round pick, and you gave up a 7th-round pick, and the player, you're still getting value back.
Yeah, some value. I mean, moderate value, but I mean, it's definitely you're going to end up picking, 30 or so higher than you would have before. So, and the Saints, and probably other teams too, but we can name off the top of our head like Zach Strief or Marcus Colston. Like, there have been late-round draft picks that in the Saints' history that have turned out to be very good players.
Yes.
So, yeah, anytime you can do that is good. I'm sure with Kroger, it's that the coaches in Houston think his talent is obvious, but as a rookie, his approach needs to be more refined in terms of whether it's outkicking his coverage. I mean, his net was kind of the problem.
Yes, it was.
So, I guess being more, purposeful about how he's delivering his kicks.
Guys, the surprising thing to me as they opened up free agency, and it's something we've talked about, it feels like, again, since the season ended, was, again, eating dead money. The Saints now, again, have the NFL leading dead money, $92.2 million. They spent $141 million on just the first day. That doesn't include what they did with Caden Ellis a little bit later. I'm sorry, I think Caden Ellis a little bit later. They have about $13.5 million in cap space remaining, but they ate the dead money for Cam Jordan, $18.76 million, Davis, $14.9 million, Taysom Hill, $13.72 million, and Murrow, $1.4 million. And they were already, again, eating the contracts, again, in dead money of Ramczyk, $11.9 million. And, of course, the big hit this year was Carr's $35.6 million in dead money. It was surprising that, again, for a team that has kicked the can down the road for so many years to try to get under the cap, this year to say, you know what, we're going to take it in one swoop, we're going to eat it all, and we're going to be free of this next season. Did that surprise you?
It did. I didn't necessarily see that coming, and that's really the remarkable thing about this offseason is that they were able to be big players in free agency and apparently very successful with the choices they made and getting their books in order and setting themselves up for probably a better year next year in free agency. To be able to do all of that in this 1 year after so many years where the month of March was spent almost exclusively restructuring deals just to get cap compliant, not to free up significant money, just to do what you had to do by the deadline. And so to get all of that taken care of has been remarkable. I didn't see it happening this well, this quickly. And again, a tip of the hat to Mickey and the front office.
I would agree.
And the only other thing I'd add is that, again, it seems like Kellen Moore and Mickey have a good synergy. And what I would say about Kellen that everyone seems to agree on is that while he may not be or may not appear to be as charismatic or as combustible as some coaches that we've covered in the past, especially you've covered, right? Like not just Sean Payton, but Jim Mora.
Yes.
He was combustible, huh?
Yeah, and Mike Ditka.
Ditka, yeah.
Ready, fire, aim.
Yeah, ready, fire, aim.
But while he may not have those attributes, if you will, everyone says he's extremely organized. And this, to me, looks like a plan, like a realistic plan of, we're trying to ascend. We want to be better in 2026 than we were in 2025, but it's not probably realistic that we're going to win the Super Bowl in 2026.
Right.
So, although the Patriots did get there, but then they got smoked. So, so if you're trying to make a plan that's realistic over the course of multiple years and trying to build the foundation, this is how you build the foundation. Is that you say, okay, this is going to be another growth year for us. We're going to go from, we're going to try to get closer to 500 this year, and then going to go from then make the big jump in year 3 when we have all that room to add to know exactly what we have and what we need going into year 3 of the Kellen Moore program.
And go ahead.
And just real quick, along those same lines, not meeting Demario Davis's market value, allowing Cam Jordan to get on the market, being prepared, if necessary, to move on from Taysom Hill and maybe even Alvin Kamara, it fits in with that same plan. Is that we're building something we're putting together a 5 or 10 year or longer run here where we're going to compete. We're not going to invest a lot of money and playing time in guys who are going to be here for the first year or 2 of that going forward. We're going to focus on guys that are going to help us in that 5 or 10 year run that we're planning on having. And so I think this all fits in with that organizational and the plan that Kellen Moore and the organization as a whole seem to have. They're putting together what they see as like a decade-long run. It's not just a year-to-year thing.
Right.
Yeah. And I think even Mickey Loomis would tell you from his own experience, 2006 was kind of an unexpected anomaly. It was really a 3 to 4 year plan that Sean Payton was on that kind of, reached its pinnacle in 2009 with the Super Bowl, but they were also really good in 10 and 11.
They were.
And probably would have, and they were good in 13, probably would have been good in 12 if it wasn't for the whole Bounty situation.
Sure.
So,
I do want to get to Kamara in a moment. When you look at what they've done, now's the time to strike. You've got a quarterback on a second-round contract. You've got 3 years now to build this roster around him and not have to go ahead and pay, again, big starting quarterback money to a player. So it makes sense. Eat the money now. Get cap compliant. You're going to have a lot of money next year, a lot of money the following year, and then that following year you're going to have to pay your quarterback. So now you get as many assets as you can, and get rid of that negative money on your books, and that gives you an opportunity now to go out and be fresh next season in free agency, to be aggressive if you like, again, if not, but also again to be targeted like they were this time around.
Yeah, and I think this all gets back to Kellen Moore, because this is 5 years now that they've missed the playoffs after winning 4 straight division titles. And they made the decision when Sean Payton stepped away, and I wasn't necessarily against this, that they made the decision, we're still relevant. Let's not blow this thing up and rebuild. We can just tweak it and we can continue to be relevant. Well, that didn't work out the way they hoped. Some of it was injuries, some of it was maybe not having the right head coach, and some of it might have been luck, but some of it might have been a miscalculation. And now I think the story here, as Kellen Moore goes from year 1 to year 2, is not only did they, without making a big announcement, not only did they jump full force into rebuilding instead of just dipping their toes, they did it effectively because they hit on the quarterback in the draft.
Right.
Now they've gotten their finances in order, and they're in a position to build around him before they have to give him the big-time money. So I think that's the real story of the last 12 or 13 months, is that the rebuilding that could have begun after the 21 season and didn't, finally, it not only happened, but they made tremendous strides in the first year of doing it, in a position to continue to accelerate that.
Right.
Yeah, and the good news is that there still seems to be a lot of confidence among incoming players, such as Edwards, based on his comments today, in the, I guess, in the organization as a whole and its ability to be a good place to be a professional football player. You know, they just like the way, they like the relationships. They still believe in the Saints' reputation as past winners and their ability to be winners again. So, I mean, of course, they're bound to say some of that. It's just a matter of, like, in my position, when you're in an interview, how much of that is unsolicited and seems genuine, you know, as opposed to, you know, just kind of trying to say the right thing to the certain question.
I'll stay with you for a moment because you were at the press conference today. They did rework Alvin Kamara's contract, an obscure rule that, again, that Mickey and Kai Harley found. It's a 50% restructure rule. It clears $8.1 million of cap space this year. It sets him up for a June 1st, post-June 1st cut if they choose. He will leave behind $11.39 million in 2026 and $8 million in 2027. His base salary is no longer fully guaranteed. That's $10.15 million. Moore was asked about Kamara today. What did he have to say?
Well, he said he didn't on it because he hasn't had any conversations with Kamara about him potentially retiring. But what he did say was that he said, we've had conversations. I understood we've to mean the organization, you know, front office and coaching staff, had conversations about a contingency if Alvin's not here. And you kind of felt like that was in the context of the signing of ATN, who does a lot of the same things that Alvin does, you know.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, and as a younger ascending player and someone with, you know, Louisiana ties, and they were touting all that stuff. So certainly, I think the specter of Kamara retiring or moving on is there. It's just a matter of how badly he wants to keep playing and how much flexibility he's willing to have with the Saints. But in the past, when we've spoken to Kamara, like last year, about the prospect of being traded, you know, again, he's like, no, you never know exactly whether you should take with a grain of salt what he says, because sometimes he's just a little off the wall. But he said stuff like, "Oh, I've made enough money playing football, and I like playing here. But if I had to play somewhere else, I would just retire and go chill out in Africa or something like that, you know, or he could go do NASCAR or something." So I think that it might be more, if he's not going to play next year, it might be more likely that he retires than he gets traded or.
Well, what's your take? Well, I mean, both you guys have been around Kamara since he was drafted. Do you think he comes in and competes this year and tries to make this team even in a reduced role, where maybe again they're taking advantage, much like they did with Cam Jordan last year, where they reduced his snaps, but they still got again a great deal out of him on a week-to-week basis? I mean, putting him in space, allowing him to catch the football at the backfield could be a plus for Kamara and the team, or is this a thing where you think they're just going to move on?
Well, I think in Alvin's case, it's what's in his heart. Because if Alvin is as motivated for 2026 as he has been for every other season since 2017, I think his mindset is, I'm going to go in there and I'm going to show them, and I don't care what other running backs are here. I'm going to necessitate them giving me a significant role, because that's who I am, that's who I've always been, that's who I can still be. But if he's thinking about, I like this entrepreneurship and the NASCAR stuff and the other businesses he's had, and he doesn't still have that drive, then I could see him walking away, because I think he's like Taysom Hill and he's like Cam Jordan. He doesn't need football as much as a lot of guys need football, but if he's ready to compete, I don't think he cares who else is on the roster, because he knows he can go out there and force them to give him a significant role, because that's who he is when he's healthy.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things he has to consider, but I'm with you. He doesn't, or at least he doesn't come off as a guy that desperately needs to play professional football, and even talks about how he doesn't watch football on TV.
Right. Yeah.
So he's not like a football junkie necessarily. But he clearly enjoys playing, and he's clearly good at it. I think he likes being part of the team and everything. And so, I think he's going to have to do a cost-benefit analysis for his own life and say, well, maybe there could be some benefits in terms of just, he's coming off the worst season of his career, largely because of injuries. His lowest production by far, fewest games, fewest touchdowns, fewest yards, catching or running. Maybe he'd like to think, he's got another good season in him, and maybe not having, maybe having more of the situation like he had with Mark Ingram, right, with another bona fide, starting caliber running back there with him, could open the door for him to have quality over quantity in terms of snaps.
Yes, like we saw with Cam last year, where again 10.5 sacks, 50% again usage on the field.
And I think one other thing to keep in, I think a major point here from the Saints' perspective is with Kendre Miller and Devin Neal, regardless of what happens with Alvin, they're in a much better place at running back. If Alvin's there, then great. That's a good problem to have. Two great veteran running backs. But if he's not there, they're still set at running back.
But we talked about the additions. Your thoughts on the losses? Alante Taylor at the star position was outstanding. Demario Davis, again, what he meant for this organization on and off the field. They've lost Stoll, again, but they've added. They lost Foster Murrow, who's been a big locker room guy. The thoughts on the losses?
Yeah, I think that the biggest loss would appear to be, to me, Alante Taylor, just because of where he is in his sort of career trajectory. He and even Kellen Moore said it today, he probably has his best football still ahead of him. And the Saints just have to decide. They had a pretty good secondary last year, and it's a team game with a lot of specialties right all across the roster, and you've got to decide where you can afford to lose talent and where you desperately need to gain talent. And I think they've just made that decision in terms of trying to build a roster that gives them the best bang for their buck and the best chances to continue ascending and to win more as they keep building on Kellen's plan. So I think, with Demario, look, he's a smart player, a great leader. He's been an amazing physical specimen in terms of his reliability and ability to play at a high level at his age and without hardly ever missing games. But like we said before, he is getting older, and sometimes a linebacker's production is circumstantial, and I'm not necessarily saying this about him, but you just have to realize that when the Saints are behind all the time and the other team can afford to play more ball control, what they end up doing is running right at linebackers.
So you're going to make plays.
So you're going to your tackle stats are going to go way up. And the Saints were behind in most games last year, and the other teams had more leeway to stop dropping back and throwing all the time, and they could try to shorten the game and run right at Demario Davis.
Right.
So because I just try to think, well, how many game-breaking plays did Demario make last year? He was, and again, I don't want to downplay how good of a year he had, but did you see a lot of tackle for losses, sack fumbles, blitzing, all that kind of stuff?
Right.
Not necessarily more than we'd seen in the past. So,
Les?
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and I think probably big picture-wise, Alante is the bigger loss because of what's ahead of him.
Yes.
And what's ahead of Demario on a more limited basis. But I think they probably are confident that as good as Alante was for them and will be for the Titans, that they can replace him. It may be somebody on the roster, it may be a free agent, it may be a draft choice. but they can find somebody who can fill that role adequately, and they were going to have to probably add some depth in the secondary anyway. So secondary becomes a primary area for them to address the rest of the offseason, primarily because of Alante leaving, but also because I think they had some depth issues they had to deal with anyway.
Fortner was also, again, he also left, again, for a nice deal for him to Carolina. He may be, again, fighting for a starting job there. Saints have $13.5 million of cap space remaining. They did do a restructure with McCoy, $7.36 million added. They still have a few other players they can deal with. Granderson is one of them. Ruiz is another that they can still create more cap room if necessary. Positions that need to be addressed now as again they go into the second wave of free agency.
Well, I already mentioned secondary. I think wide receiver is probably an area they want to address. I do think that they have a couple of intriguing prospects there. The player they got from New England who was injured, and Devon Bailey. Yeah, and of course Olave had his best season. So I think that's potentially a position that could be much better than it appears to be on paper, but I still think they need to address that. I think the interior of the offensive line might still be addressed, at least in terms of depth. And then defensive line, especially if Cam doesn't re-sign, I think they probably need to do something with their edge rushers. So those are the ones. But secondary, followed by wide receiver, I think are probably the biggest ones at this point.
Brett, your thoughts?
Yeah, I know Cam Jordan really is kind of still a wild card at this point. I mean, he's among the players across the league that would be most likely to take a hometown discount, but I think he wants the offer to be competitive, and if the offer is not competitive and the other offer is coming from a contender, he'd kind of be silly not to just try that. But he does have extraordinarily strong ties to New Orleans now, not just having been here his whole career, raised his family here. I mean, he's made it pretty clear that all things being equal, he'd rather play here. So we'll have to see what happens there. But in any event, he's compared himself to Julius Peppers in terms of longevity, and Peppers has only played 2 years longer than Cam has now.
Right.
So it's not a long-term thing either way. So they may still need to look at pass rush going forward, as well as of course, receiver. I mean, Rashid Shaheed's apparently available, but I think that...
he just re-signed with Seattle.
Oh, he did re-sign, okay. Yeah, because I was going to say, I think the fact that he entered free agency may have had something to do with why he was traded to begin with, because the Saints were afraid he was going to want more money than they wanted to pay.
And I think he got it.
Apparently he got it. So.
And in Cam's case, he's always said that he loved the fact that his dad, Steve, played his entire career with one organization, the Vikings, and that was something he really wants to be able to duplicate. So we'll see how that plays out.
Guys, last question when it comes to the Saints, and then we're going to take our break. How does free agency affect the way the Saints are going to approach the draft? They're 8th overall right now. They've never been one to trade back. There's going to be a good player that falls to 8. Look, I don't believe Jeremiah Love will be there. That's one of the reasons why I think they went out and got Etienne. But if he's there, I still think, again, you run to the podium and you get him. But there are going to be some really good players at position of needs that may fall. Now, again, I think the wide receiver position, the only guy that really is worthy of a top 10 pick is Tate. They may have a different feel on that. But how do you think what they've done so far will affect what they do in the draft in April?
Well, since we have this new Mickey Loomis calling the shots, maybe he'll trade back and shock us, continue to shock us throughout the spring. I think it puts them in a position to do what they always want to do and haven't maybe been able to do quite as comfortably the last couple of years while they were sliding back a little bit. And that is address enough needs in free agency so that they can focus on the highest rated player on their board each time they pick, regardless of position.
I agree.
And I think they put themselves in that position, and I think that would mean that they probably would take Jeremiah Love if he was going to be there. I don't think he's going to be there. But I think they will be very comfortable taking the highest rated player on their board each time they pick, regardless of position.
Same question.
Yeah, I mean, I think that ideally you want the position of need to be a tiebreaker, not the primary reason you're
Great
drafting
point.
somebody. And it could be a situation where there are guys with similar grades, and one position coach is arguing for one guy, and one position coach is arguing for another, you know, and so that's how that shakes down. But I think history has shown actually that teams that pick a player that's super talented that was not a need tend to benefit from, in the long run, from picking that player.
Right.
Like Deuce McAllister.
Yeah.
Right? So, because you would have said after they had made the playoffs in 2000, they don't need Deuce McAllister, they need someone else. But, you know, Deuce turned out to be a great player here. I mean, it's unfortunate that he got hurt, but
Yes.
you know, so I think there's a lot of examples where that happens. And so, yeah, I think they would, if Jeremiah Love were available, I would think they would go for him.
I think that when you got a dynamic back like that, first of all, he doesn't get past Tennessee, in my opinion. You still go after a guy like that. And look, again, they've only got one real. We'll see what happens with Kamara, but right now ATM is your back. We'll see how that works out. Brett Martel, the Associated Press, Les, he's at CrescentCitySports.com, Saturday Down South, and now also with NOLA.com. Joining on our program tonight, I'm Eric Asher. You're watching Inside New Orleans Sports. Stay tuned. Hear from our underwriters. We'll be right back. We'll start with the Pelicans in the next block.
Located at 3701 Iberville Street in Mid-City is Katie's Restaurant and Bar. Open 7 days a week, Katie's offers daily specials for lunch, dinner, and Sunday brunch. Serving New Orleans cuisine such as fried shrimp platters, grilled redfish, and a fully stocked bar. And don't forget about our expanded event seating and local entertainment. Featured on the Best of Food Network's diners, drive-ins, and dives, Katie's Restaurant and Bar.
Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration has been family-owned and operated since 1989. Burkhart has energy-efficient solutions and offers brands such as Mitsubishi ductless AC units and Amana, the only manufacturer with a lifetime unit replacement warranty. Burkhart's offers maintenance bundle packages that include servicing your AC, generator, and tankless water heater. For more information on the services Burkhart's provides, visit acpromise.com. Burkhart's Air Conditioning, Heating, and Refrigeration, providing comfort for life.
Welcome back to Inside New Orleans Sports. I'm your host, Eric Asher. Brett Martel, the Associated Press, Les Seats, CrescentCitySports.com, Saturday Down South, and NOLA.com are our guests. I was joking, but I'm really not joking. Well, since Les has been covering the New Orleans Pelicans, there's been a revitalization of the franchise. Maybe that has a little bit more to do with DeJounte Murray, but at the same time, the Pelicans are now 22-45. They've moved up to now 12th in the West. They beat Toronto last night, 122-110. Murphy 28, 3 assists, 7 rebounds. Murray's 27 points, 6 assists, 2 steals. The Pelicans are 7-3 since the All-Star break, 8-7 since February 1st. February was their first month in which they had a winning record in the month. They have 15 games remaining, 8 games worth teams versus teams are 500 or below, 7 games worth teams that are, again, above 500. I'll start with you, Les. The change that we've seen in this team, is it because Murray has returned?
That's a big part of it. I'll give you another number. I believe they're 12-9 since Herb Jones came back.
They are.
They went to the new lineup where they did not have a true point guard in the starting lineup until Murray came back. And you didn't know what you were getting with DeJounte Murray because it was such a bad injury. And I think in these 2 weeks since he's been back, he looks better than he did last year. Because he got hurt on opening night. He broke his wrist. And by the time he worked his way back from that, he played, for a month or so, and then he had the Achilles injury. So you didn't know what you were getting with him. I think you're getting exactly what the previous regime thought they were getting when they made the trade 2 years ago. And so I would say that the last 21 games reminds me of the last 9 games of the Saints season.
I agree.
You put Tyler Shuck in there at quarterback. He's running the show extremely well. Everybody's rallying around him. The same thing with DeJounte. And the thing that I think is most important is it changes the outlook on the off-season tremendously. All of a sudden, people say, oh, we got a quarterback. We don't have to think about drafting a quarterback in the first round. We're going to build around Tyler Shuck. And the perspective of the team's immediate future changed completely.
Yes.
Now you look at DeJounte Murray and you say he's going to be running the show, and you got Murphy and you got Jones and you got Williamson, you got Bay, who was a godsend.
Yes.
And then two of your big pieces are 20 years old and 21 years old. And DeJounte Murray's running the whole thing. So the outlook for the offseason has changed, in my opinion, dramatically.
Yes.
They don't have the number one pick to add to the roster.
Right.
But I think the prospect of them being relevant next season looks so much better since DeJounte Murray came back and showed who he is and what he can be for this organization.
Not just, again, his ability to play the point and be the quarterback for the team, but the toughness he has brought to this team, the attitude that he has brought to this team in just a short time. Again, you see the difference. And again, I agree. It's what Griffin and Langdon saw when they went out to go say, we need a quarterback, we need a leader. He's been that player since he's come back. Your thoughts?
Well, first I want to say that I can imagine there's a certain pope who would smile at Les calling a former Villanova guy a godsend. You know what I'm talking about here?
That is correct.
But second of all, look, what I've noticed in this, the whole 12-9 stretch that they're on, I mean, their defense is so much better because not just Herb. I mean, Murray can play defense. And look at his arms, right? Like, he has long limbs. He's quick, he's a veteran, he's savvy, he's clearly motivated, right? He's definitely played with like a chip on his shoulder and a lot to prove. And having a guy like that as your sort of floor general, I think really helps. And having a guy that's just an elite defender like Herb really helps, because they were scoring points before and losing. They were scoring a lot and still losing. And now they can, there's just a better balance of offense and defense. And what happens is that when they play other bad teams in the league now, they're beating them sometimes comfortably. And when they play other mediocre teams, they're able to beat them. And it's just really the really good teams that obviously they're still going to struggle against, but they probably should have been even better than 12-9 because they kind of had a little bit of a collapse maybe against the Lakers. But they had some tight games and they were in that Phoenix game until the end. So just even if you look at the losses and how close they've been, some of them against pretty good teams, it's reason for hope. Never mind the fact that they're 3 games over 500 in their last 21. And
one other thing about DeJounte is his first year in New Orleans was really difficult on him, not because of the injuries. He had, family problems. He had to deal with multiple crises in his personal life. He made the comments on the podcast about how difficult the year was. I think maybe some of that was misconstrued or exaggerated, but clearly he was not a happy person. His mindset has changed completely since he's come back. And I think a lot of the intangibles you talked about come from him being in a much better place mentally and spiritually.
I do want to ask about the veterans that are playing now, because again, it's kind of a head scratcher on why DeAndre Jordan wasn't playing, again, especially when you have as many problems as they've had inside with the center position. We're seeing, again, the rookies now relegated to the bench. And you guys have both covered this team for a while now. Do you think that was a mandate from Dumars and Weaver once the injury started to happen to play the young players instead of maybe continue to play the veterans? The veterans, having the mixture of the veterans now starting and bringing the rookies off the bench has been wonders for this team as well in this stretch.
Well, I think it was just organic based on a series of individual decisions. First game Borrego coached, he put Derek Queen in the starting lineup, which made sense because they needed a boost, and he had shown that he had an unusual skill set for a big man, and that worked well. But then they continued to tweak the lineup a lot of different ways. DeAndre Jordan, I think they were trying to be a little younger, a little more athletic, and then they came out of the All-Star break, and that game against Milwaukee was just atrocious defense. And I think out of desperation, Borrego said, well, this guy's a pro. He's 6'11", 270 pounds. Right. At least he can stand in the lane and prevent people from dunking on us every time down the court. And it turned out he played really well because he was a professional and he's a good player and he stayed prepared and he's smart. And so I think I think in both cases, Queen and Fears reacted well to going back to the bench.
Yes.
And Queen's sort of in and out of the lineup now. But I think they both embraced the role, and that's helped. But I think it was all just, Borrego trying to figure it out. And I think it was just a series of individual decisions that enabled them to evolve to the point they're at now.
And there's also definitely a school of thought, too, that it's good for rookies or relatively inexperienced players' development and confidence to be able to see the game from the bench when the starters are out there, and then to be able to try to follow that example against players that are at the same level that they're at, and gain confidence doing it, and then they kind of ascend from there. And so, obviously this year, I mean, the way things were going with the Pelicans, with the injuries and so forth, I mean, they wanted to see what those guys could do. They did the whole baptism by fire thing, and it didn't really go great for Fears and Queen all the time, although they were able to show some extraordinary potential. I mean, Fears he's just got to learn how to finish. I mean, he can blow by anybody. Right. It's unbelievable how many times he gets to the rim. He just doesn't always make the shot.
And an NBA weight room off season is going to help him that.
But he's got his upside, to me, looks huge if he can do that. So, I mean, there's definitely reasons for optimism there. It's just that it's been a long slog of mediocre to bad basketball and injury-riddled rosters.
They're coming together. It seems like, again, there's some good chemistry with what's going on. The next big question is what happens in the offseason. And again, I'm not so much player movement, because there's going to be player movement. They're going to probably try to move off of Looney and also Poole. But what's going to happen with Borrego? Has Borrego done enough in your mind to become the permanent head coach? Or is this a situation, again, where they're going to go in the direction where they want to hire their head coach?
Yeah, I think Borrego is well liked, and I think he's done a good job with the hand he's been dealt. But whether he's done enough to outweigh other candidates that Dumars may be interested in I think remains to be seen, because there are some quality guys out there, whether you're talking about was it Mike Malone?
Yeah.
I think
well, if they're willing to spend that kind of money too.
Yeah.
That's another thing. Were they willing to go out there and spend money? Because the rumors out there, again, Schmidt-Due has written about it, again, that they've tried to do cost cutting since Dumars has come on board. The last thing you want to do when you're trying to, again, turn a franchise around is to start becoming, again, a team that's cutting costs instead of, again, investing in your team. I think they're going to go in a different direction. I just do. I think they want their guy. But again, I think Borrego has done an admirable job so far in keeping this team together. Your thoughts?
Well, the first thing I would say is I think he's done an outstanding job under the circumstances. Being the interim head coach for this season and being the right guy long term aren't necessarily the same thing. But having said that, he is very smart. He identifies problems. He makes sensible adjustments to address those problems. And usually it works out where they improve. It may not be linear, it may be gradual, it may be slow. But remember when Joe Dumars fired Willie Green, he said, we don't have an identity. And Borrego spent like 2 months trying to figure out that identity.
What is the identity now in your opinion?
Identity now, and he said it last night, he said it before.
Right.
They are a tough, physical, aggressive, defensive team, which happened when they let Bay in the lineup and moved Fears to the bench, and then Murray came back. So they are a tough, physical, aggressive, defensive team that uses its defense to get out and run to try and overcome its outside shooting deficiencies, and they share the ball to enable themselves to score better than their individual talents might suggest. To me, that's a very good description of how the Bad Boys Pistons teams played. I think Borrego and Dumars are on the same page about finding that identity. Dumars wanted an identity. They have an identity. It meshes with the Dumars' experience as a player.
Yes.
I don't have any insight on to what they're going to do. I think, Tom Thibodeau's out there.
Yes.
You have this guy Quinn in Miami, the assistant coach is like the Ben Johnson of the NBA. A lot of guys who would be good candidates. Taylor Jenkins develops young players well. A lot of people out there. But in my mind, I've seen enough. I think what Borrego has done with this group, the respect he has from these players, what Brandon Ingram said about him last night after the game, about what a great relationship he had with him when Borrego was the assistant. I just think it makes sense to give him the job going forward, because I think he's proven he can handle it. And even though there are attractive people on the market, new regime probably wants their own guy, I could see them going in another direction, but personally, I've seen enough from Borrego.
He could cost, right, in what they're looking at their price point as well. You start talking about Malone and Thibodeau and what those guys are going to cost as opposed to Borrego. It might fit exactly where they are. Look, I will say this. Pelicans hopefully will continue to move up in the standings again. So again, less ping pong balls, less chance for Atlanta to get that first overall pick. But again, at the same time, it's going to go crazy here. There's going to have to be some moves in the offseason. They got to get better shooting the basketball.
No question. That's one of their biggest weaknesses. They've been about 27th or 28th all season long with their three-point shooting, even though Trey Murphy's an elite three-point shooter. They have to get a lot better there. They're going to have to do something in free agency or by trading, but I think that's probably the number one thing. I think their rim protection has to get better.
Agreed.
I mean, Yves Missy's a nice prospect.
Right. But he's a guy. He's coming off the bench for you. You need a legit center, right?
Sure. I think 3-point shooting and rim protection would be the two things.
When you 3-point shooting. When you look at or the most recent victory over Toronto, it shows how hard they are to beat when their three-pointers do fall, right? Because you had 9 threes just between Trey and Herb alone. Right. Herb is not. I know Herb. He's a fundamental player. He tries to take the open shot. A lot of times they don't go down. He's still trying to master that, I think. But last night I think he was 4 for 6.
Yeah.
And when a guy like Herb goes 4 for 6 from 3 and Trey's hitting his, all of a sudden Toronto's trying to make the playoffs and they're coming in New Orleans and losing by almost 20 points, right?
I agree. Yep.
So,
no doubt. I want to shift gears now to the college game, staying with basketball. First of all, congratulations to McNeese, who punches their ticket to to March Madness. Again, out of the Southland, they are the Southland champions. They beat Stephen F. Austin last night. Want to give some props to the NAI teams. Got a lot of NAI teams that are in the tournament here from New Orleans and from Louisiana. Loyola, Loyola men, Xavier men, Suno men, all in the tournament. NAI women's, Loyola women, Xavier women, LSU Shreveport, LSU Alexandria, LSU Christian, all NIA, again, participants in the tournament. Best of luck to all those teams. We turn our attention now to, again, major college, LSU, Tulane, University of New Orleans. First of all, University of New Orleans, Stacey Hollowell, tip of the cap to him and Master P, from 4 wins last year to 15 wins this year, competing for the Southland Championship. You got to give a lot of credit to what Stacey Hollowell did at UNL.
Oh, no question about it. And I think he was one of those guys like John Summerall when Tulane hired him. You looked at the candidates and you said, that's the guy. Stacey Hollowell has ties to Tim Floyd. Understanding the UNO program, the success he had at Loyola, winning a national championship. I don't think there was any question he was the right guy. He had an impossible situation in the first year. He didn't have any players. He got hired late. And they muddled through, and then they made tremendous progress from year 1 to year 2. I think they're in good hands, and Master P's presence is certainly a positive.
Same question?
Yeah, I agree with everything Les said. It's just that's a really tough situation right now. I mean, their future just seems a little uncertain in this transitional period back to LSU New Orleans. Is that what it's going to be? I mean,
don't get me started.
And
don't let me go down that rabbit hole.
And if not from Master P, I mean Percy Miller, right? It would be really, really tough. But I think that they have some nice synergy and sense of purpose there. In the face of all the challenges. that made them definitely more exciting and more competitive, and it's kind of a nice story, especially if they continue that way next year.
Tulane is advanced in the American Conference tournament. Again, they will play Charlotte tonight after beating Memphis last night. 18-14, 8-10. They were 8th place in the American. On LSU's side, they lost to Kentucky yesterday, 87-82, 15-16, 3-16 in the conference, last in the SEC. All right, both coaches now are on the hot seat. McMahon has a couple years left on his deal, so does Ron Hunter. The question is, again, the powers that be at LSU and Tulane say both teams had injuries to their major players, both are very good coaches, both need one more year, again, to maybe get a chance with NIL to come in and turn the fortunes around? Or do they say, at this point, nobody's watching the teams anymore. We need a change at the coaching position. For LSU, everybody seems to be hot on Will Wade. Obviously, for Tulane, it'll be interesting to see again who they could woo to take on that program. Do you think there'll be some changes? We got about 2.5 minutes left at either LSU or Tulane, and if so, why?
I think it's more likely at LSU, although the finances could impact that. But, and I think McMahon's a good coach. He just hadn't been able to get enough players and develop them and sustain it. But he's won about 30% of his SEC games in 4 years, and they went 9-9 2 years ago. So he's had 3 terrible years, finishing last in the conference this year. And they're the 3rd most popular sport in their building. Okay, women's basketball and gymnastics.
Right.
Or bigger and more popular programs right now. And I've been hearing Will Wade's name for weeks now, and there's a movement to bring him back. I'm not sure if LSU's a better job than NC State right now, but maybe Will Wade feels like there's unfinished business. I don't know. So I think LSU's more likely if the money is there.
Yes.
Ron Hunter's had 7 years, I believe. I believe he's about 500. They had the tragedy this past year.
Right.
I think you have to take that into account. So I think he maybe is more likely to get another year than McMahon at this point, but I think a case could be made for making a change there. And I remember the day he got hired, he was like a rock star. I thought he was just the perfect hire for Tulane. And there's been incremental improvement, but they haven't gone to the NCAA tournament. So that's a tricky one, and David Harris is going to have to figure it out, because I think the standard for everybody at Tulane has been raised by the football program.
You got a minute and 30 seconds.
Okay, I agree. Tulane's tricky, but Tulane does need a charismatic coach, and Ron Hunter does accomplish a lot of that. I mean, he's really a personable guy, charismatic, loves basketball, gets the students to show up, rouse them up. There's a lot of good things about him, but he hasn't quite delivered quite on the level they wanted. Maybe another year, though, given the roster circumstances. I think that if the way Governor Landry involved himself in the football program is any guide, then Will Wade is already coming back. Right?
I agree with you.
He's going to find the money.
Right.
That he hired a McNeese guy to run the school.
Right.
And
Wade's best friend is part of the organization
and Wade
now.
loved it here, and there's no secret that he loved loved LSU. And so I don't know. I mean, I just think there's a high probability, even though the money doesn't make any sense at all, because people are just thinking about it financially. It's like, well, it doesn't make any financial sense to fire McMahon. But I mean, they just spent like $150 million if you count the Kelly buyout and the Woodward buyout and the new contract for Kiffin all together. It's like,
it's going to happen. I see it. It's going to happen.
Yeah,
they're going to find the money, and it's going to happen because, again, they got to put men's basketball back on the map. You can't be last in the SEC at LSU in anything.
Well, and the thing is, he was fired for doing what is now required in order to win.
Exactly.
Now, I understand he broke the rules at the time, and he was really arrogant about it.
Yeah.
But, now it's like, hey, we know he can buy players. He did it when it was illegal.
He was one of the best at it.
Yeah.
No doubt. Brett Martel, Associated Press, Leslie's, CrestlySports.com, Saturday Down South, and Knoll.com. Incredible job on the panel tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. I told you it was going to be a good one. I knew it would be. All right, guys. Thanks so much for tuning in. There's a QR code on your screen that will take you to the WLAE-TV YouTube channel, also to my website. I say it every week because we are truly blessed to have so many ways for you to catch our program. WLAE-TV, WLAE-TV2, Pelican Sports Television, WLAE-TV's YouTube channel, always on all our social media platforms. Again, set your DVR, you'll never miss the program. You catch me on the radio, 106.7 The Ticket, that is weekdays 4 to 6. You can listen live at ericasher.com. 106.7 The Ticket has a website that you listen live. Also, again, we have our own app, 106.7 The Ticket app. Download it today. iHeartRadio app, TuneIn Radio, other digital platforms to take the show and the station with you everywhere. I want to thank the underwriters who make our show possible. We appreciate each and one of our underwriters. Please support our underwriters. It's the reason why we've had the longevity of 13 years on the air here at WLAE-TV. So again, support our underwriters. And of course, the folks here at WLAE who produce our program and do an incredible job. Ron Yeager, Jim Dotson, Alex Chacon, the best director on the planet, William Hill. For Brett Martel and Les East, I'm Eric Asher. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week for another edition of Inside New Orleans Sports. Thanks for watching.
We're local and enlightened.